Compass Publishing.
Hi everybody. Good morning or good afternoon or good evening, wherever you are in the world. My name is Jon Edwards and I'm going to be your presenter today. Nice to see everybody. If you have any questions at all during the presentation, or if you want to leave any comments or suggestions, just leave them in the chat room. I've got people here to support me. If you have a question, they're going to read it to me and I'll do my best to answer it. Anyway, I hope everybody is surviving fine with the COVID-19 wherever you are. I know it's very scary times and difficult to be inside all the time if you're self-isolating, and everybody's a little unsure about what's going to happen. But anyway, let's focus on building up our teaching skills and doing some professional development, and forget about COVID-19 for 1 hour at least. So let's start. So my topic today is about scaffolding, and the subtitle is Setting Learning on a Firm Foundation. I'm going to talk a little bit about the theory and what scaffolding is, and then I'm going to give you some strategies and some techniques that you can use in your classroom to help your students to develop faster. Hi everybody. Everybody's saying hello and good morning in the comment section. Hi everybody. Anyway, let's begin. I wanted to start actually with a demonstration. So what I'm going to do is give you two different activities. It's the same content, but I'm going to present it in two different ways. What I want you to do is try at home, try to answer my questions or do the activity on your own, and we'll see how the two different activities are different, okay? So here's the first one. This is in a German class. Let's imagine you're learning German. What I want you to do is read the script, and then I'm going to ask you some questions about it, okay? Go ahead. Okay, so let's answer some questions. So how many people are talking? And what are they doing? Victor says two people are talking. Very good. Maybe he speaks a little bit of German. And what are they talking about? Okay, let's try the second version, the second example. Okay, so what do you see in the picture? It's a train station, right? So when you go to the train station, have you ever been to the train station? Maybe you have been there and you see lots of trains, you see lots of passengers, and there's a schedule when the trains arrive and leave, and people have to run and bring their baggage and get on the train. So let's learn a few words to start with. Bahnhof means railway station, and Zug means train. Zeitplan means timetable. Passagiere means passengers. Fahren means to drive, like to drive a car. And gefährlich means dangerous. And nicht means not. And spät means late. So let's look at a conversation. What do you see in the picture? There's two people, right? There's a man and a woman. And where are they? They're in a car. So they're going somewhere. Let's read the conversation together. The man says, "Fahren Sie schneller." The woman says, "Nein, das ist gefährlich." The man says, "Wir würden unser Zug verpassen." And the woman says, "Wir würden nicht zu spät kommen." So now let me ask you the questions again. So how many people are there in the conversation? There's two. And where are they going? They're going to the train station. What are they talking about? What's the discussion about? Not the directions. Kyung-im said the directions. Yeah, right. They're about to miss the train. Miguel said they're about to miss the train. The man is saying, go faster, go faster. And the woman's saying, it's dangerous. Don't worry, we're not going to be late. So here's an example. The same information, the same dialogue, presented in two different ways. The first one, in the first case, you couldn't understand at all. But in the second case, the same dialogue, we presented it in a different way, and you could more or less understand, even though I'm sure most of you don't speak any German. So this is what we are calling scaffolding. This is what we call scaffolding, and this is the topic of our presentation today. So what is instructional scaffolding? Let's talk about what we mean exactly here. So scaffolding, when we're talking about, fields outside of education, scaffolding means the kind of bars that go on the outside of a building when we're building it, when we're constructing it. So when do we use this? We use it when we're building when the building is going up, and we've already built the foundation, and we're trying to make the building higher. So we support the walls until they're solid, and then the important thing is we remove it. We don't leave it on the building. It doesn't look very nice, so we take it off, and after the building can stand on its own. So this is the concept, the very basic concept of scaffolding. We support the students while they're developing, and then as they develop, as they gain confidence or mastery of the skills, we take away the scaffolding. So if we wanted to define scaffolding, we could say scaffolding is all of the ways that we can help learners to do an activity or task that they might otherwise not be able to do on their own. A little bit of theory. Don't fall asleep. It's very short, and I'll try to make it as simple as possible. So when we're talking about scaffolding, the most important figure to talk about is Lev Vygotsky. Maybe if some of you have studied education before, you're familiar with this. So he was a Russian psychologist. He lived at the beginning of the 19th century, beginning of the 20th century. And his main idea, his key idea was, with the assistance of a knowledgeable other here could mean another child, a parent, or a teacher, the child can learn skills that go beyond their current level of development. So what does that mean? If we draw a kind of diagram, this will be very familiar to anybody who's studied education. You can think of it like this, like three concentric circles. In the center circle, we have what learners can already do. Things that they're very comfortable doing, they have no problem, they've already mastered these skills. In the outside ring, we have what learners can't do yet. Things that are too challenging for them, things that, even if we help them a little bit, they could not do. But then in the middle ring, the yellow ring, we have what learners can do with help. This is what Vygotsky called the zone of proximal development. That's a very fancy word, but basically it just means the sweet spot, the ideal spot for learning to happen. So with a little bit of help, students can perform the task, they can practice the task, and they can gain mastery of the skill. So this is what we're looking for when we give scaffolding. We're trying to help students move from that area of what they can already do to the area where they need a little bit of help. Another very important figure is Jerome Bruner. He was also an American psychologist. And his key idea was the teachers or the people that are instructing the students, the knowledgeable other, has to give an appropriate amount of guidance, not too much, not too little, an appropriate amount of guidance to help the students learn. And the important thing is, as they learn, as they go through the stages of progress, we need to reduce or withdraw that scaffolding, that support. So one useful analogy here, one useful kind of metaphor is in terms of learning to ride a bicycle. I'm sure if some of you are parents, you've taught your kids how to ride a bike, or if you are, if you know how to ride a bike, you've gone through this process as well. So usually when students are learning, when kids are learning to ride a bike, we give them some strong support. We put wheels on their, hi Jenda, we put wheels on their bike to help them steady themselves and get to the next stage. And the next stage is riding without those wheels. And usually the parents take off the wheels and then they kind of support them as they're moving forward, and they give them some instruction what to do. Maybe they ride their bike with them and give them some demonstration. Then the next stage is they withdraw the support. They take away the support. They know when not to help. The reason is they can't always be there. They can't follow their child around on their bike all the time and make sure they don't fall off. So they need to know the right time when the student is mastering the skill to withdraw the support and let them become independent. So this is the really important lesson about scaffolding. Support, let them accomplish what they can't do on their own, let them build confidence, and then withdraw the support. Does anybody have any questions about the basic idea of scaffolding? Does everybody understand okay? If there's no questions or comments, I'll move on to talking about some strategies. So how can we make this happen in the classroom? So I'm going to talk about 7 strategies altogether. Don't worry, they're all very simple. So we'll just take them each individually, and then we'll do a little bit of review at the end. So the first strategy for scaffolding is selecting the right kind of tasks, leveling tasks appropriately. So let me start with a picture. So what do you see in the picture? There's somebody lifting very, very heavy weights. Maybe he's lifting 300 kilograms or 250 kilograms. For most people, myself included, this would seriously injure me, possibly even kill me. But this man has been doing this for a long time. He's achieved mastery of weightlifting, so he can handle it. So as a teacher, we need to know what our students can handle. We need to know, what they're going to be able to do, maybe with a little bit of help, but something that they can manage by themselves. So in order to do that, we need to be aware of the stages of learning. And one useful kind of framework to be able to do that is, it comes from Krashen actually. So Krashen in the 1980s, he was a professor who was teaching people Tessel, so very famous. Anyway, maybe his framework is a little bit outdated. Maybe it's been improved since the 80s, but I think it's basic, and it's very useful to kind of help us to understand where our learners are at in terms of their progress. So there are 5 predictable stages that all language learners go through. So the first one is pre-production. That's the green box on the far left. So pre-production is, another word for that is the silent phase. That's usually like the first 6 months of learning the language. And students, usually they just have kind of a receptive vocabulary. They're still building their vocabulary very much. They can't articulate their ideas at all. So they're able to just say yes or no, or maybe nod, point to things, very minimal speech interaction. And their vocabulary is about 500 words as they are building up. But about 6 months into learning, we enter the early production phase. So the next 6 months is that early production phase. And in this stage, they have about 1,000 words of receptive and productive vocabulary. They have very limited comprehension, so they can understand at a very basic level. And they can produce 1 or 2 word responses to questions, usually using very familiar vocabulary, very familiar phrases, and only present tense, and they make a lot of mistakes. As they pass the 12-month mark, from 1 year to 3 years, they enter the speech emergent phase. So speech emergence means they've got a fairly good vocabulary, they've got a good foundation of vocabulary, they have fairly good comprehension at a basic level, they can produce simple sentences, they make a lot of errors, but they're able to convey their idea at a basic level. Then from 3 years to 5 years, it's more sort of building fluency. And as they build fluency, their vocabulary increases. They are able to express more complex ideas. And when they are using complex grammar, they still make mistakes, but they're able to express more complexity in their ideas. And then after about 5 years, they're very advanced speakers. So for each of these 5 stages, pre-production, early production, speech emergent, and fluency, there's different kinds of activities that we can give to students. What we're going to focus on is just sort of comprehension activities, but this applies to all kinds of activities, all kinds of tasks. So for the pre-production students that are just starting to learn, they have only basic communication skills, the best option is to ask them questions or give them tasks that involve pointing or single word answers. So for example, get them to look at a picture and point out items in a picture. Show me the ball. Circle the triangle. Where's the boy? Who has the ball? This kind of task is ideal for the beginning learners. For early production, when they're sort of 6 months to 1 year, yeah, right. Jorge said it's the listening period, also called the silent period. Exactly, that's right. That's Krashen's theory. During the next stage, the pre-production, early production stage, you can ask students questions where they can answer with 1 or 2 words. For example, yes/no questions or either/or questions. Do you like TV or do you like YouTube? And then you can ask them things like who or what or how many. These are all questions that don't involve long answers. They're not like why questions or how questions. Those are the kinds of questions we should ask for students who have been studying for about a year. We can ask how and why questions, things that students can answer with short sentences, things that where they're explaining or giving reasons. For students that have entered the early to intermediate fluency stage, we can ask them questions that require lengthier responses, like maybe hypothetical questions like, what would happen if something? Or what do you think about this? Or what do you think would happen if this? These are questions that require more than a 1-sentence response, so a little bit more complexity. And at the advanced stage, we can ask them questions that require more sort of summarization or evaluation or creative thinking. So we're giving them some input and then we're asking them to process it and express their own ideas about it. So decide if, or retell the story in your own words, or what do you think of this? So they're evaluating. This kind of task is suitable for advanced learners. Okay, so the key point here is understand your learners, what they can handle, and give them tasks that are a little bit outside of their comfort zone, but not too much. Asking students who are beginners to do, to give answers that are more than 1 or 2 sentences, 1 or 2 words, sorry, is going to tax them too much. So some tips. Leveling tasks appropriately involves breaking larger tasks into smaller, more manageable steps. Start with some easy, very easy tasks. Hi, Louise. Start with some very easy tasks and build up their confidence and get them used to speaking in English first, and then give them more challenging tasks as you gradually increase the difficulty. And as we're giving students a task and watching what they're doing in the classroom, we have to kind of monitor the students, keep an eye on students, especially looking for, you know, these worry lines or stress from our students. We have to know when they're getting frustrated, when they're getting overloaded with the difficulty of the task, and we need to know when to jump in and help, or even when to stop the activity. I think a lot of teachers, they go into a classroom without a backup plan. They're so invested in making a task work that they just keep pushing students, and it creates a very Julio says, what are the advantages of retelling stories? Interesting but boring. Maybe, yeah. Well, they can offer their alternative endings, things like this. These are for more advanced students. So sometimes teachers push the activity and they, you know, create a kind of impossible situation in their classroom. Sometimes it's better just to stop the activity and try something else. Jorge asks, should I use my mother language when monitoring, and how? I think it depends on the level of the students. If they're very low level, like what we talked about before, pre-production, or very you know, early stage, like early production, we should be very careful about giving them too much difficult language. So yeah, L1 could help them here a lot. But for higher level students, we shouldn't do that. Let's talk about the second strategy for scaffolding. This is activating prior knowledge. So let's say we have a reading about dogs, how dogs originated from wolves. And we're just, if we just throw our students into that reading without kind of preparing them mentally for that, lower level students, maybe even higher level students, could struggle with understanding the reading. But what if we started something like this? Tell me what you know about dogs. What do you see in the picture? What can you see about these dogs? How are these dogs different from wolves? We could get them to brainstorm, maybe in pairs first, and then we could open it up to class discussion, and then we could go into the reading. So how would this help students? Yeah, they're very cute dogs. I used to own a corgi before, that's why I chose this picture. I love corgis. The Queen's dogs. So lead-in activities or schema activation activities help the students to recall what they already know. Already they know some information, maybe in their mother tongue, or even maybe in English. They know some basic vocabulary. They know some words that are related to the topic. And this sort of primes them. Carla says, prior knowledge also activates motivation and increases self-esteem. Definitely. And also it gets them interested in the topic. Getting them interested in the topic is going to give them kind of motivation, as Carla mentioned, give them motivation to want to read and want to understand the passage. Lucero says, I think especially for early stages, retelling stories is great for learners. Yeah, definitely. So activating prior knowledge, or what we call schema, the kind of the web of ideas around a topic, this primes the students to receive and process new knowledge or new information, fit it into their schema. It's commonly used with input skills, like when we're going to read or when we're going to listen or watch something. We usually use this kind of schema activation, but it's also very useful for output skills work as well. So let's say we're going to get them to talk about something or going to get them to write about something. activating schema is going to help them to prime their ideas and kind of refresh their memory of their vocabulary so they're ready to talk about it or ready to write about it. So here's some kind of activities that you could use. One is what I call the five senses chart. So let's say we're going to learn about, life on the living things at the seashore or going to the beach. We could talk about the five senses, things that we see, hear, feel, smell, and taste in that environment or when we go to that place. It could be for situations like going to the market, going to the supermarket, going to the beach or the forest. Then all of this vocabulary is kind of refreshed in their minds and they're ready to understand or to produce language. Another one is what we call KWL charts. This teacher, this is taken from a website, and this teacher did a really cool group activity where they put know, wonder, and learned on the board, and then they had the students do it cooperatively with Post-it notes on the board. So in this case, they put the topic at the top of the whiteboard, and then they get the students to know, they want them to put Post-it notes about what they already know, what they're kind of thinking about or what they wonder about the topic, and then after the input or after the activity, what they learned. So this can be done in sort of two stages, as a pre-activity and as a post-activity. And again, this kind of refreshes their schema, activates their schema and gets them ready for the activity. Julio asks, what hemisphere do you want to open when you're talking about the knowledge? I think the idea about hemispheres, the parts of the brain have different hemispheres of the brain having different roles in thinking. It's kind of been debunked a little bit, but basically, we just want to refresh their memory, sort of remind them about what they already know about the topic, pique their interest in the topic. This is the basic idea here with activating schema. Here's another one that we can use, which is the prediction chart. Prediction charts are usually used for reading short fiction, but you can also use it for nonfiction as well. So what you do is, before you read the story or read the activity, you get the students to just scan it very quickly. Just scan over the title, the pictures, the headings, and say, what do you think this is going to be about? What kinds of things will the passage talk about, or what will the listening passage talk about? And then after, as a post-activity, you can get them to fill out, was I right? What actually was talked about in the passage? Portillo says, we should always have a plan B whenever we see an activity isn't working. Definitely. I think this is what I call back pocket activities. The teachers should always have something in their back pocket to just pull out and to get students doing something in case an activity fails completely. So this is a page from our New Frontiers. It's a secondary school coursebook series, a 6-level secondary school coursebook series that we produced here at Compass Publishing. And the way that we activate schema is we start each unit with a big picture. That's not just for decoration, that's to get students talking about the topic. So for example, this unit is all about family, doing things with your family, and the names of different family members are going to come up in this unit. So the picture is a big family gathering, and students can talk about who do you see in the picture. It's going to activate their schema, things you do with your family, people in your family, all of this kind of vocabulary will come up. Sonia says, with schema, we make students have fun, be alert, develop concentration. It's so useful, definitely. It's very underrated with a lot of teachers. It just takes, 5 or 10 minutes of class time, but it just, it opens up the possibilities of class so much more. The third strategy for scaffolding is about pre-teaching vocabulary, or what we call front-loading. So we saw this with the demonstration at the beginning. You know, when I threw you into the activity without any pre-teaching, you were completely lost. But when we pre-taught the vocabulary, you had some kind of footholds or a little bit of leverage to kind of understand the passage a little bit. So best practices for pre-teaching vocabulary. Focus on vocabulary that's critical to understanding. I think one mistake a lot of teachers make is they look at a passage and they highlight all the words that they think their students won't know, and they teach all of those words. The problem is, students may memorize the words that are not important to understanding, and they may not memorize words that are, you know, the very critical words. So it's better to just present the critical words. You have to make a kind of judgment call as a teacher, which words are critical, which ones are not. But definitely like content words, words that are related to the topic, these should be focused on. So don't teach all the words that you think will be new for the students, just focus on the critical words for understanding. Define them in multiple ways and with easy language. So usually give a simple definition, give an example sentence, and elicit the students, use of the word from the students. Use visuals whenever possible, especially with lower level students. Sometimes if you give them a little picture and you give them an example sentence that relates to that picture, they can understand very clearly from their own experience. Always give the part of speech. Is it a noun? Is it a verb? Is it an adjective, adverb? It gets them used to using these words to describe vocabulary, and that's going to help them in the long term with their learning. Also, we talked about this in my last seminar. Try to find opportunities to teach cognates or related words. So when you teach them one word, you can teach them related words at the same time. David Mezza says, can we get the material? Do you mean the PowerPoint slides? I'll link those in the description for the video after we post the video. Give students multiple opportunities to hear and use the words. So when I teach vocabulary, I usually recommend that teachers keep these three strategies in mind, or this loop in mind. So define the word, or even better, get the students to define the word. Ask them what they think it means. This builds up what we call the web of meaning. They use other words in English to define the new word, and that kind of creates linkages between the words, so it builds up their web of meaning. Then get them to use the word, or use it yourself in an example sentence, and then elicit the words from students. So ask them a question that's going to get them to use the word in a sentence, and get them to speak in a full sentence. Of course, this is for sort of like low, intermediate, and above. So this is from our Reading Future series. So the way that we pre-teach vocabulary is we have a little activity. So we've got the warm-up activity, which is sort of our activating schema. We ask them some questions, we get them to talk about a picture. Then we move into pre-teaching the vocabulary, and what we do with that is we have the list of keywords, and the teacher can teach those using that teaching loop: define, use, elicit. Then we have a little activity where they match the word to the visual. So this helps them to understand the word, the meaning of the word, by if you just teach them the word. Hi, Roger. If you just teach them the word and you don't get them to use it right away, they're less likely to remember it. Roger says, I think practicing new words by pronouncing them slowly and many times leaves a good footprint in order to recall those words when they pop up again in a different context. Definitely. Usually teach the word, get the student to repeat after you, and very slowly and careful enunciation. Thanks, Roger. The fourth strategy I wanted to talk about is about demonstrating or modeling. So think about, just as a metaphor or an example, think about how we teach kids how to tie their shoes. So if you were just to tell your child, okay, put this lace over this lace and loop it around and then put it through the hole and then tie it tight. If you just, teach them with just a description or instructions, there's no way they're going to be able to learn it. They're going to be very, very frustrated, and they're not going to pick up that skill. So instead, just like this mother is doing, we need to demonstrate it. We need to show them, maybe on our own foot. We have to tie it in front of them, or we have to tie their shoe with them at the beginning. But the important thing is we need to demonstrate or show rather than just telling. So how can we apply this to teaching English? Well, there's lots of opportunities for showing the outcome or the product to the students before we start the activity. For example, if we want them to fill in a graphic organizer, or we want them to do some brainstorming in a chart, we can do an example by ourselves, and we can show that to them on the board or on the whiteboard or on the projector before they start the activity. Alternatively, if there's for example, a writing passage that we want them to produce, we can read that with them as a class. We can produce one on our own, or maybe there's one in the course book. We can read that with them and show them some of the features of that to demonstrate what we want. If you're doing a speaking activity, you could do 3 different ways you could do modeling. You could model it yourself, teacher modeling, or you could choose a strong student and model with them. Be careful not to always choose the same student, or they'll catch on. Hi, Nicholas. Nicholas says, I'm using Reading Future. Oh, I'm happy to hear that. I hope you're enjoying it. So we can use teacher modeling, we can use teacher-student modeling, or we could use student-student modeling. We can get 2 students to stand up, demonstrate a dialogue or demonstrate an activity before we launch into the actual activity. If you're doing a reading and you want students to kind of process the reading in a certain way, you can, or also for doing things like brainstorming activities, you can verbalize your thought processes as you demonstrate. This is what we call think aloud. So think aloud means you're kind of making students aware of what you're thinking or what you're kind of expecting them to be thinking as they're doing it. Oh, maybe I should do this. Maybe this is a good idea. I wonder what the writer of this passage thought here. I wonder what the main idea is. So as you're kind of verbalizing it, they're kind of getting clued in to what you're expecting from them. The 5th strategy, so we've talked about leveling the tasks appropriately, choosing the right kind of task that gets them into the zone of proximal development. We've talked about activating schema, activating prior knowledge. We've talked about front-loading vocabulary or pre-teaching vocabulary. We've talked about demonstrating or modeling the kind of behavior that you want from the students, the kind of products that you want from the students. The 5th one is providing visual aids. Some people, myself included, are very visual learners. If somebody just says something to me, probably I won't understand it the first time. But if somebody shows me a diagram or somebody shows me a picture of something, I'll get it right away. That's just the kind of learner that I am. And a lot of learners are like this. So using visuals in your teaching supports visual learners like myself. And also, a picture is worth 1,000 words. You don't have to explain things in detail. You don't have to use a lot of fancy vocabulary that they won't understand. You can just show them the picture, they'll get it. That also supports them to understand your explanation. Victor says, nothing motivates better than the feeling of achievement. Provide a good foundation for learning, definitely. And that's another reason why we want to kind of level the tasks appropriately. because if you give them a task that's overly challenging, too challenging, they're going to get very frustrated. They'll think, I can't do this. This is going to really demotivate them. So choosing the right level of task is very important. So what do we mean by providing visual aids? We mean things like diagrams or charts or graphics. Graphic organizers are great for both understanding texts and planning texts, planning writing. Also using videos as a pre-activity, watching videos and talking about them, looking at pictures and talking about the content of the pictures. All of this is about visual aids. Jorge says, I think visuals are a good way of avoiding translation. Definitely, definitely. This is why we include lots of visuals in our books, so that teachers don't have to use L1 to give definitions. So what do we mean by diagrams? Let's say your reading is about a complicated process, like in this case, the rock cycle, how rocks are formed and how they kind of get eroded, or they kind of go through this system where they're going through different phases of a cycle. In this kind of complicated reading, if you just present the description in words, some students won't get it. But if you present a diagram, in this case showing them the different stages and how they relate to each other, it's going to really help them to understand. Also, graphic organizers. There are many, many different kinds. Cause and effect, Venn diagrams, process diagrams, all of these, pros and cons. So all of these can be used both for helping students to understand the deeper structure of a passage, or to plan their ideas so that they relate well to each other if they're writing longer passages. In our Integrate series, we use actually a combination of different visual aids. We use pictures, lots of visuals to assist them. You can see we've got lots of different pictures, and the pictures are kind of aligned with specific text in the passage. We also use video to get them to understand more thoroughly. We use the video to augment the reading passage or the writing task. We also use graphic organizers to help them arrange their ideas. The sixth strategy that we can talk about for scaffolding is giving time to process. I think a lot of us as teachers are very rushed. We have to kind of fit a lot of material into our classes, and we tend to push through material very quickly, and we don't give students enough time to process or to kind of fully work through ideas and understand them deeply. So I want to encourage teachers that, to find time, even 1 minute, even 30 seconds after they ask a question or after they do a reading or after they do a listening passage, to really allow students time to process the content. So what does this mean? Students need plenty of time to process and understand. They have to kind of verbalize and work through ideas, either in their own mind or with a partner, to understand deeply. They need to verbalize, to make sense of and articulate their learning. So how can we give time for students to talk to each other? We can use things like think, pair, and share, or turn and talk. So that means turn and talk to your partner, or turn around and talk to the person behind you. Or we can use mingles. Get up, find somebody who's wearing the same color as you, and talk about what you just heard. That can be just, even 1 minute. 1 minute of processing time is going to help them to share their ideas, build up each other's comprehension, and then they're going to understand it more deeply. Sonia says, I really agree to give students the necessary time for them to complete their tasks. Yeah, to complete, also to process or to kind of parse content that you've presented them with. If you ask them a question and you expect an immediate response, you're probably asking too much. The seventh and final strategy for scaffolding is about providing language support. So providing language support is probably what teachers think of most commonly when they're thinking about scaffolding. But as we've seen, it's only one strategy among all of the seven. So what do we mean by language support? Language support means we're putting something either on the whiteboard or on a handout or on the slide to help students while they're doing an activity. So what could that be? Basically, we have three different levels of language support that we can offer. We can offer word level support, sentence level support, or text level support. Let me give you some examples of each of those. So word level support, usually we could think of it as something like a word bank. A word bank could be for words that they are pre-taught to understand the activity or the reading passage, or it could be for them to use in their dialogue or in their conversation activity, or it could be for using in their writing passage. So this is like a list of words that we would put on the board to assist them. In this case, let's say, coming back to that rock formation example, we could give them a list of different kinds of rocks, different nouns, different verbs that they could use. We could also give them a set of adjectives to describe rocks. So this would be just something on the board. The important thing here is students could use it if they need it, or they can ignore it. That's the important thing. For sentence level support, what we basically mean here is what we call sentence frames or sentence banks. Sentence frame here means we're giving them a structure and they can plug in their own nouns or their own adjectives or their own verbs into the structure in order to give to express their meaning. Again, these are kind of key structures. Maybe students who haven't mastered these structures yet, they would need it, but students who have already mastered the structure, they can just ignore it. So that's important. We don't want to spend too much time with this. We want to give it as a handout, kind of like a little cheat sheet that students can use to help them. And the last kind of textual support is text level. Language support is text level support. So that means we're giving them a passage frame where they can plug in their own information to the passage in order to make it their own. So it has an introduction, it has a body, it has a conclusion, and they can customize that to their own needs. But it shows them how to arrange their ideas and to kind of link their ideas together to make it meaningful. Again, students can use this, or they can ignore it if they want. This is a mistake that I see a lot of teachers making. They give the passage frame and they expect students to always fill that out. They don't give students room to kind of step outside of that or to experiment beyond that. The problem there is what? If you are always giving them that frame, if you're always expecting them to write in the passage frame or the sentence frame, they'll never develop independence. You need to take it away sometimes. So in books like Integrate, we provide the passage frames, but we also expect them to students to step beyond that at some point, to become independent, to ride the bike by themselves, as we talked about before. So just to sum up what we have talked about, we talked about 7 different strategies for supporting students and in helping them to get to that zone of proximal development where they're able to do a task that they couldn't otherwise do. So that scaffolding is important because it creates independent lifetime learners by providing a supportive environment. It helps them, it gives them support, but it also facilitates student independence. Like we talked about, it has to be something that's optional, that stronger students can ignore, and something that we take away when students don't need it anymore. So that's the basic message here. Anyways, I'd like to open the conversation up to you guys and ask you if you have any questions. If you have any questions, you can, or any comments, if you want to share your ideas about scaffolding, feel free to write them in the comment section. My next seminar. It hasn't been scheduled yet, but I'll probably have one next month, and I will post on Facebook about when that is. Thank you, Jorge. If anybody has any questions, you can always leave them in. What I'll do is I'll make a Google form, and I'll link it in the description, so you just can find the video afterwards and post the questions there. Thank you, Tom. Anyway, thank you everybody for your attention. I hope you found this useful, and stay safe everybody in this difficult time, and I hope to see you next time. Thank you very much. Sorry, Nicholas says, is it possible to see the video again here in YouTube? Yes, we're going to post it afterwards. Bye everybody.